All right, let's jump right in. The Federal Reserve just made a huge policy change. And trust me, it's the kind of move that ripples through everything, from the interest on your loans to the US national debt. But the real reason they did it, well, that's where the story gets really interesting.
So here's the headline news. Quantitative tightening, QT, is officially done. For the last couple of years, the Fed has been on this mission to shrink its balance sheet, basically sucking money out of the financial system. And now, all of a sudden, that has come to a full stop.
But this is where the plot thickens. The official reasons just don't seem to add up when you dig in. Our source material for this explainer points to a completely different motivation, one that's kind of hidden from plain sight. So what is really going on? Well, first, let's do a super quick refresher.
To really wrap our heads around this, we need to be crystal clear on the Fed's two big power moves, quantitative easing and its opposite, quantitative tightening.
Okay, so imagine the Fed has a giant brokerage account. During quantitative easing, or QE, the Fed goes on a shopping spree for things like government bonds. But here's the wild part. The thing that makes the Fed different from you or me, they literally create brand new money out of thin air to pay for it all. And just like that, new cash gets injected right into the economy.
So to put it simply, QE is the gas pedal. The Fed's balance sheet grows and cash floods the system. Quantitative tightening, or QT, is the brake. The Fed lets those bonds expire, and the money it gets back just vanishes. It's pulled right out of the financial system, shrinking the cash supply.
All right, now that we've got the lingo down, let's tackle the official story for why QT is over, and why our source says, hold on, that doesn't make any sense.
The explanation you'll hear pretty much everywhere is that the Fed had to stop QT to prevent a big liquidity crunch. The fear, supposedly, was that there wasn't enough cash in the system for banks to operate smoothly overnight, which could spark a crisis.
But here's the thing, the source points out. The Fed already built a massive safety net for that exact problem back in 2020. It's called the Standing Repo Facility, but you can just think of it as a permanent, unlimited emergency cash window. Any bank that needs cash can get it, overnight, no questions asked. So with a backstop that powerful, our source argues a real liquidity crisis is basically impossible.
So that's the key question, isn't it? If the system already has this built-in fire escape, then ending QT must be about something totally different. What's the real objective here? And this is where we get into the really fascinating, clever part of this new policy. See, it's not that they just stopped QT. It's way more sophisticated than that. It's a pivot.
Okay, check this out, because this is where the magic trick happens. For government debt, treasuries, the Fed is now taking all the money it gets when old bonds mature and is just buying new bonds. So on that front, they've stopped shrinking. But look at the mortgage-backed securities. They are still letting those expire just like under the old QT. But here's the twist. All the cash they get from those mortgages, they're immediately turning around and using it to buy new short-term government debt.
So what's the end result of this shell game? Well, the Fed's total balance sheet looks flat, so it seems like nothing's happening. But under the surface, what they're actually doing is draining money from the mortgage market and funneling it directly over to the US government. It's a really subtle way to make it much, much easier and cheaper for the government to borrow tons of money. But that just begs the question, why? Why would the Fed set up this elaborate system? To get to the bottom of it, our source says we have to look at the law that created the modern Fed in the first place.
This line, right here, from the Federal Reserve Reform Act of 1977, is, according to the source, the key to the whole puzzle. It legally requires the Fed to grow the money supply along with the economy. And the argument is, this isn't just a technical detail. It's the core of a system built for a very specific purpose.
So from this point of view, the Fed's famous triple mandate is really all about helping the government's bottom line. Think about it. Maximum employment? Well, that means the maximum number of people are paying taxes. Stable prices? That means avoiding deflation, which would crush tax revenues. Plus, a little inflation is great for eating away at the real value of all that government debt. And moderate long-term interest rates, that one's pretty obvious. It's about making sure your number one customer, the US government, can afford its borrowing addiction.
Okay, so if that's the real motivation behind all this, where are we headed? Based on this whole framework, the source makes 3 pretty specific predictions about what we should all be watching for next.
First up, get ready for short-term interest rates to come down. As I'm talking right now, the market is pricing in a whopping 87% chance of a rate cut at the very next Fed meeting, and this is just the start.
Prediction number 2. Keep an eye out for a big push to deregulate the banks, specifically loosening the rules that say how much debt they can pile on.
The idea here isn't just deregulation for its own sake. It's a targeted move to free up the banks so they can buy almost unlimited amounts of government bonds. In other words, you get the banks to do the QE for the Fed without the Fed having to put it on its own politically sensitive balance sheet.
And the third prediction? This is where things get weird. A steepening yield curve. This means even as the Fed is forcing short-term rates down, long-term rates are expected to actually go up. Why on earth would that happen? Simple. The market will start getting nervous about future inflation from all this money being printed to fund government spending.
And that brings us right back to the central idea. The end of QT, this clever policy pivot, the rate cuts, the deregulation. According to the source, all these things are just different tools designed to solve one single massive problem: how to make it possible for the government to borrow and spend without any limits.
Which leaves us with a pretty provocative final thought. Are we watching right now as the entire financial system gets quietly re-engineered, not for the health of the economy, but to guarantee a bottomless pit of new money for the government to spend? It's a powerful idea, and one that is definitely worth keeping a close eye on.
If you like this video, please hit the subscribe button, like, and share.